Hey, history students, Mr. Birch here, and welcome to 8th grade social studies test practice questions. Today we're talking about a colony for English Catholics. So as always, when you see the question, press pause, take a moment to read and answer the question, then press play and we'll go over it together. Let's get started. All right, we see Massachusetts is a refuge for English Puritans, as blank is a refuge for English Catholics. And then the question says, which colony correctly completes this diagram? We have Maryland, Virginia, South Carolina, and Georgia. So what is the question asking? Well, the main thing we need to look for here is which colony, which one of these four choices is a refuge for English Catholics? So English Catholics, Catholics being the main thing we're looking for. Well, what can I eliminate? Well, if we know anything about the colonies, we know that the northern colonies, also known as the New England colonies, tended to be more created for religious reasons. As we go further south, it's less and less common for the colonies to be based on religious reasons. The one thing we know about Virginia, it was the first colony, Jamestown, the first permanent English settlement, and it was formed and prospered based on economics. Eventually, it was tobacco, if you remember. So that doesn't make sense. It wasn't about Catholicism, it was about money. And then also Georgia. Even if we don't know anything about Georgia, we know Georgia is the furthest south of all the colonies. So again, just going on the idea that as we are farther south, there's less likelihood that the colony was formed for religious reasons. Even if we're just having to guess, we can assume Georgia is not founded on Catholicism because it's a religion. Okay, what do I have to know? Well, Maryland was originally formed as a British proprietary colony of Lord Baltimore. The city Baltimore, Maryland is still named after him today, who wanted to create Maryland as a sort of safe haven or refuge for English Catholics in the New World. There were many disputes regarding religion in the colonies and in the Old World too, and Catholics, Protestants, Anglicans, and Quakers commonly differed in their positions. So Catholics were often on the outside looking in, and by that I just mean that the rest of these groups were a form of Protestantism while the Catholics were a different form of Christianity. So Lord Baltimore chose to make Maryland a refuge for fellow Catholics like himself. If you know anything about Catholicism, you know that Mother Mary is an iconic image or person in the Catholic faith, and so maybe that's one way we can remember it. Maryland, Maryland. And we think of Mother Mary for Catholicism. So maybe that'll help you remember. So let's look a little bit about what Maryland and some of the original colonies were. The Maryland Charter was granted by the English Crown in 1632, so about 12 years after Virginia, after the Plymouth colony, and then it gave 12 million acres of land at the top of the Chesapeake Bay to Lord Baltimore. You see where I have it circled there on the map. Maryland is that odd-looking little colony or state with the whole Chesapeake Bay, the waterway, just carving right into the middle of it. Maryland developed similar to its neighbor to the south, which is Virginia, with eventually large plantations and tobacco farms because they shared very similar land. However, Maryland was seen by Baltimore as a safe haven or a refuge for Catholics in the New World who were fleeing religious persecution in England. In fact, Maryland is famous for enacting the Toleration Act. It gave religious freedom to all, and I put that in parentheses, without persecution. All meaning all Christians, of course, because anybody that wasn't a Christian, well, they actually said that if you denied Jesus, that they had the right to execute you. So their version of toleration might be a little bit different of what we have today, but just remember that Maryland tolerated Catholics while some of the other colonies weren't so tolerant of Catholics.